Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com.
On Jenna Ellis tonight, Monday's Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity may be having an impact on the judge and prosecutor in President Trump's sentencing in the hush money case. AOC on a rampage, threatening to file articles of impeachment against the U.S. Supreme Court, some or all members, for their 6-3 decision on presidential immunity. But is she being a hypocrite? The past week has been a great one for President Trump, who finally said that he's settled on a running mate. Who might that running mate be? We're going to run down the short list for you. Democrats claim illegal immigrants commit fewer crimes per capita versus U.S. citizens. Is this true, or is this just a left-wing talking point? We'll have those stories and more. Be sure to tune in to Jenna Ellis Tonight.
My fellow Americans, we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an absolute disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue, and high interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even amid the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans just like you and me should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero-hassle, education-first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com, that's legacypminvestments.com, to download their free gold investing guide. I've read it, and there is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is not the time to roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that I sent you.
Hello and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. My name is Ken Rosato. I'm filling in for Jenna. I spent over 3 decades working on mainstream media as a TV news anchor in New York City and in Miami. I literally worked for all 4 of the so-called 3-letter networks and know exactly how they think and why. It's a pleasure to share my views with you tonight, so let's dive right in. Former President Trump's sentencing in his hush money case was postponed till at least September, as Judge Merchan had agreed to look at any possible impact of the new Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. He says that he'll decide whether to move forward with the sentencing on September 6th. Trump was scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th on his New York conviction. The former president denies he did anything wrong. So if Judge Merchan decides the presidential immunity decision does not apply to Trump in this case, the sentencing would happen September 18th at the earliest. Trump's lawyers insist the Supreme Court ruling means the conviction just has to be tossed. Meanwhile, even the fringe folks at far-left MSNBC admit the Supreme Court decision could mean a nail in the coffin for special counsel Jack Smith's January 6th indictment of President Trump. Smith's case against Trump is based on the theory that Trump knew he lost the election but urged his supporters not to accept the outcome and just go and break the law, ignoring the fact that Trump put out that videotape saying, everybody go home peacefully. Now, this includes demanding that Vice President Pence delay certifying the vote. But now those conversations cannot be used as evidence based on the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. Chief Justice Roberts wrote, quote, whenever the president and vice president discuss their official responsibilities, they're engaging in official conduct. That means that Trump cannot be prosecuted, period, even if he demanded that Pence not certify the 2020 election results, because constitutionally, that is still official presidential business. This has enraged liberals who have made the January 6th uprising a mantra, calling it one of the worst days for our nation. They wanted to see Trump behind bars for any role that he may have had in that or anything for that matter. With us tonight to talk more about the impact of the immunity decision on the legal actions against Trump is a special guest, Auron MacIntyre, who's a writer for The Blaze. Auron, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, look, in the New York City hush money case, didn't DA Alvin Bragg sort of shoot himself in the foot because he linked Trump's hush money payment to a violation of election laws, which then ties in the whole presidential tie, which we may see that is now official business. I mean, obviously, that's what Trump's people are going to try to make an argument for. Bragg will argue the violation occurred when Trump was just a candidate for office, so the presidential immunity ruling wouldn't apply. But Trump's lawyers will argue the prosecutors built their case on evidence from Trump's time in the White House. So that could be called an official act, which is then unenforceable based on the new ruling. What do you say about that?
I think ultimately it's very clear that Bragg's case was always politically motivated. It was always in very shaky ground, and I'm no legal expert, but it seems that even with all of the gymnastics that he set up to go ahead and try this case, ultimately, yeah, it will fall prey to this decision. In fact, I think a large amount of what the left is trying to bring against President Trump basically gets turned over because of this. They're running around crying about presidential immunity like it's some new idea that the Supreme Court just, went ahead and fabricated to cover for Trump. But obviously, that's not the case. It's a basic thing necessary to do the very job that the president has to do. And Joe Biden would be subject to all kinds of wild speculative prosecution if the immunity doesn't apply in the way that the Supreme Court is now saying that it does. So while liberals are running around and screaming about this as if it's something invented by the Supreme Court to cover for Donald Trump's terrible fascism, ultimately this is simply an application of common sense that would be necessary for any president to do their job.
So not only Joe Biden, but also think about this, President Obama, President Clinton, think about all the potential crimes they would have committed. If you look back at Obama, remember he ordered the al-Awlaki death. Al-Awlaki was a U.S. citizen, and he was with his children, and Obama ordered that he be bombed. So he was killed. He never had a trial. Now, granted, he was with bad guys. He was probably a terrorist. We'll never know for sure because he never had a trial. He never had the opportunity to have one. But Obama ordered his death. How come that was never talked about by the left? Biden could be tried potentially after he leaves office. Well, now he can't because of the new Supreme Court decision, but he could have been tried for treason because he was ordering Border Patrol not to arrest people at the border, not to send people back. Don't do your job. In fact, do just the opposite. Take their names, let them into the country in violation of 175 immigration laws currently on the books.
Absolutely. All of these Democratic presidents are used to getting away with murder because they know ultimately that the media is going to go ahead and run cover for them, and they know that no one is going to seriously take them through the ringer in the courts. The Republicans can't assume that. It's now become a matter of course that lawfare is the way that we do politics in the United States. That's a terrible place to be because it puts everyone, but especially your executive, in a scenario where they are frozen, they're paralyzed, they can't take any important action. But of course, the whole point is that it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. The left gets to do whatever they want. They get to go ahead and take action. They get to actually express a executive authority. And the right has to go ahead and cower in fear anytime they're in office. And this is how you go ahead and game democracy. You make sure that one side can do whatever it wants when it gets elected, when it gets into office, and the other side is terrified to even breathe when they're in office. That's why they're going after every one of Donald Trump's aides, anyone connected to the campaign. They're trying to put the fear of God into anyone who would go ahead and serve alongside Donald Trump, including the man himself, to make sure that anytime a Republican is elected, anytime someone is in office from the right, they are paralyzed from day one.
And I call this journalistic malpractice because the members of the media don't even have the tiniest bit of interest in looking into it when you see the left doing this lawfare. I mean, think about it. You had the Hunter Biden laptop, right? And the members of the media just thought, oh, it's just baloney, it's disinformation, or it's all conspiracy theory. Nobody decided to look into it. There wasn't a drop of curiosity on the part of mainstream media. Remember, I worked for mainstream media for 3+ decades. I worked for all 4 of the network-owned stations directly for the companies. And I got to witness firsthand the way things were done. It was usually a sin of omission, not necessarily a sin of commission. It was because members of the media who were in hierarchical ranks decided it wasn't important enough. Those are just whack jobs on the right who are suggesting these stories. So we're not going to look into Hunter Biden's laptop. Why? Because that's their guy. They don't want to do anything or say anything that might hurt their guy. If it's on the left, the left rather looking to something on the right, immediately. We used to have sometimes 4 and 5 anti-Trump stories and 1 or 2 pro-Biden stories. It's a letter B. And I would sit in a newsroom and ask my executive producer, could we possibly balance this a little bit? And they would look at me like I had 3 heads. Just the idea is orange man bad, Biden good. We don't do that. So the question is, ultimately, do you believe the sentencing will be held in Judge Marchand's court in September, or do you think this is going to be pushed until the end of the election, or after the election, I should say, or will it just disappear?
I think ultimately it will be pushed beyond that. It would have been interesting if they had tried to go ahead and do this before. I think in many ways the Democrats got what they wanted, which was the phrase convicted felon, right? That's all they wanted to do, was utter that phrase. They thought that that was critical to their campaign. If we can just tell people that the president or the former president was a convicted felon, then we have our catchphrase, we have our talking point, we can beat them over the head with it. We can use this rhetorical battering ram. That's all they actually wanted. I don't think they really wanted to physically put Trump in jail. If they had, that would have been insane. That would have created all kinds of chaos. It would have thrown the entire process into disarray. So I think that they got what they wanted, and now it will conveniently be pushed well beyond the election. So the actual issue of whether or not Trump goes to jail on this charge doesn't mess with their plans going into the election.
I think when they finally write the book on all this, they will let everybody know that the worst thing you could possibly do is charge your political opponent with anything because it hands that person the election. I mean, just take a look at the numbers that Trump got after he was charged and after he was convicted. People who didn't take a look at him before started to take a look at him because it just smelled so phony. It was so obviously set up and so obviously political. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, by the way, does not have, of course, the best track record at the Supreme Court. He had lost that one case 8-0. Of course, the 9th justice had passed, so there were only 8 justices on the court. But all 4 Democrats on the court sided with the Republicans. The liberal members, again, and the conservative rarely come together on one thing. The justices had written a scathing rebuke against his arguments. And this is a guy who was handed a mistrial, in the first corruption case against Senator Robert Menendez, the guy who's on trial again right now for having gold bars shoved in his pockets by the Egyptians. Everybody thought the evidence against Menendez was overwhelming. He's known to intentionally and leak confidential trial information to the press if he thinks it will win him popular support. And now he has built his January 6th case against Trump based on acts performed in an official capacity with Vice President Pence. Does that officially end Smith's case? U.S. District Judge Chutkan had previously said the idea of any presidents having immunity is crazy. Of course, that was before the Supreme Court decision. So does the High Court's decision effectively kill the January 6th case? What do you think about that, Art?
Well, let's hope so. Ultimately, I think there's a reason that the left has been going after the Supreme Court. There's a reason they've been dialing up controversies, especially against the more conservative members of the court, creating them out of thin air and questioning the legitimacy of the court, even talking about hacking the court at this point. And that's because the Supreme Court is now one of the few roadblocks left to go ahead and stop the advance of progressive power in the United States. For a very long time, progressives had a lock on the Supreme Court, and it did their bidding on a pretty regular basis. They used to champion its ability to go ahead and block the popular will. But now that's a problem.
Auron, hang on 1 second because we got to go to break. But don't go away. We're going to use you in the next break. And when we come back, AOC on a rampage, threatening to impeach some or all of the members of the U.S. Supreme Court after Monday's ruling on presidential immunity.
You might have heard my friend Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this ridiculous cancel culture, so they want to pass the savings directly onto you by having a $25 extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. So to get the word out, I want to invite you, my listeners, to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2 multi-pack use My Pillows are just $25. My Pillow sandals, which I have and love, are only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. And for the first time ever, the premium My Pillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long, so go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com today, but use the promo code Jenna for all of these great discounts at the $25 extravaganza.
And welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jenna's off tonight. I'm Ken Rosato. In June of 2023, President Trump received a 37-count federal indictment accusing him of lying to federal investigators about classified documents in his possession. Houston Democratic Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher said, quote, "The indictment of former President Trump reflects the rule of law at work. It is important for our country to let the legal process proceed in the courts without the interference of politicians." Fast forward to this past Monday, New York Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez threatened to bring articles of impeachment against the Supreme Court after Monday's immunity ruling regarding former President Trump. Forget the separation of powers. Forget the fact that they were just doing their jobs after a case was presented to them. Nope. The petulant bartender from elite northern Westchester County, who parades as being a poor working stiff from the Bronx, says after losing the game that she wants to change the rules of the game and fire her opponents. Oh, wait, didn't you know that she was born in the Parkchester section of the Bronx, considered among the better parts of the borough with an average household income of $74,000 a year? But then her family moved to the elite community of Yorktown Heights, New York when she was 4. Yorktown Heights, by the way, average household income, $125,000 a year. No poor young lady. AOC later moved to Boston for college and lived among the elite Bostonians before making it back to New York to find her 6-figure job that she was looking for. So let's just say she doesn't come from poverty as she tries to portray herself. AOC wrote on X, quote, "The Supreme Court has become consumed by a corruption crisis beyond its control. Today's ruling represents an assault on American democracy. It's up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return," the royal hour. Monday's Supreme Court ruling says a president has absolute immunity from prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority and presumptive immunity for official acts in general. Now, the court said that there is no immunity for unofficial acts. So everything that she's talking about is just ridiculous. The ruling does not grant the president the power of a king. All it does is reinforce the constitutional separation of powers that grants the executive branch certain rights independent of the other branches. Remember from school, co-equal branches, executive and legislative, and the judicial branch. Those are the 3 co-equal branches. Think about it. What person would want to serve as president knowing that the minute they got out of office, their successor of a different party would have them arrested and thrown in jail if they disagreed on any executive action that was performed while they were in office? In fact, President Biden should be happy about this ruling. We talked about this a little in the last segment, because now American citizens can't have him arrested for treason when he ordered Border Patrol to catch and release into our country anybody who came across illegally. The vetting process put in place by Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas only has agents ask the individual if they committed any crimes and what their name is. While many may be honest, there's no way to know for sure who's being forthright and who is not. As a result, we have example after example of rapes and murders in our country being committed by people here illegally. Without this Supreme Court ruling, once President Biden left office, it would have been very possible for family members of murder victims to try to press charges for the president for allowing these killers to come into our country. Remember, the United States was an association of individual independent states. The only reasons they decided to unite under a common flag are defined in the preamble of our Constitution as follows: to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense. How are you establishing justice when you're violating U.S. sovereignty laws? How are you ensuring domestic tranquility when you have innocent innocent tax-paying U.S. citizens being raped and murdered? How are you providing for the common defense when you have literally millions of people whom you cannot properly vet coming into our country each year? Our own intelligence agencies suggest there could be terrorists gathering here that we don't even know about yet. It's very possible President Biden could have been charged with murder in the cases of those individuals killed by illegals whom the Biden administration allowed in. Remember, Biden didn't just look the other way. His administration actively ordered Border Patrol to permit these people to enter our country in violation of our own laws of sovereignty. Then he blamed Republicans for not passing additional laws to keep them out. There are currently 175 laws on the books regarding immigration that would keep these individuals out of our country. Those laws have worked quite well throughout history, and it seems only under the current administration have the borders opened wide. Even if certain additional laws were passed by Congress in the last few months, those laws would have done nothing to stop the dozens of recent attacks on U.S. citizens, as the individuals who allegedly committed the crimes were already here or did not enter via a legal port of entry. In November of 2010, the Obama administration argued before a federal court it should have the unreviewable authority to kill Americans if the executive branch felt they posed a threat. This was in response to a lawsuit filed by the father of Anwar al-Awlaki, by the father of that man and the ACLU. The Obama administration claimed al-Awlaki was a terrorist and so ordered his killing. The only problem is al-Awlaki was a U.S. citizen with the constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and never received a trial. This decision also shields President Obama and those who carried out the killing under his orders. Joining us once again is Auron MacIntyre, a writer from The Blaze. Auron, I'm sorry about the long rant, but I've been holding it in. I waited for Jenna to have a night off so I could share. Do you think AOC even has a shot at filing articles of impeachment against the Supreme Court when she's in the minority party?
It doesn't really matter if she can complete any of this or not. Again, the purpose of this push against the Supreme Court is to sow doubt. The left, for a very long time, used the Supreme Court as a battering ram against public opinion. They didn't mind that it was overruling democracy when it came to Roe versus Wade or gay marriage. They only cared that it did the bidding of the left. And now that the Supreme Court is in the hands of a more conservative court, all of a sudden it's a danger to democracy. It's an enemy. It has to be overruled. And this goes into the larger left-wing attack on our constitutional system in general. They're attacking anything that they can't manipulate through the media and mass democracy, the Electoral College, the Senate. It doesn't matter. Any vestige of limitation on mass democracy, something that our founding fathers did not approve of, is being attacked. And the Supreme Court is just ground zero for that. They want to use it. They want to destroy it. They want to make sure that its credibility is not there in case the Supreme Court pushes back against the things that they have planned for Donald Trump and the rest of the conservative political set.
Only one Supreme Court justice has ever been impeached in our history. That was over 200 years ago, and it was for something that was minor. Well, actually, it wasn't minor. In that case, it was about witness tampering or witnesses and whether or not they should have even been included in a court case. So that person kind of had it coming to them, but ultimately, the Senate decided not to convict on that impeachment. So the question now is, would we just end up having any justice who decides something politically opposite the current Congress end up impeached him or herself if AOC did get her way?
Yeah, obviously that would be the precedent that is set, and that's exactly the opposite of what the Supreme Court is supposed to be there for. You get a lifetime appointment for this very reason, so that the tides of politics, the ins and outs, the push and pull is not something that's affecting your ruling. You should have a certain level of objectivity created by the permanence of that position. And so if you're just up for grabs anytime you make a ruling that's against the current party, then you are just subject to the same forces as the current political party, which is exactly what they're looking to do. They're trying to, again, remove any of those barriers that were built into the Constitution against a constant mob rule. And they want to go ahead and make sure that their ability to leverage the media, academia, and other consensus manufacturing institutions in the United States gives them total control at any time. The Supreme Court is one of the last vestiges of control on that. It's one of the few branches that is relatively intact when it comes to limiting and creating that separation of powers, and that's why it currently needs to be destroyed by the left.
All right, Auron MacIntyre, The Blaze, thanks for joining us. Up next on Jenna Ellis Tonight, President Trump says that he has selected his running mate. Who will the Republican vice presidential candidate be?
My fellow Americans, we are experiencing instability at every level. Our government lacks leadership, and Bidenomics has been an absolute disaster. The economy is in a fragile state. Inflation has been a consistent issue, and high interest rates have put significant pressure on the real estate market. There have been major bank failures, and many analysts say a stock market correction is likely overdue. We have global conflicts in Europe and the Middle East that have the potential to spread, but gold has soared to record highs even amid the tensions. There are so many reasons that Americans just like you and me should consider investments in gold and silver, and Legacy Precious Metals is the gold standard. I love Legacy Precious Metals because of their zero hassle, education first approach. They can help you roll your traditional IRA into a gold IRA or ship metals directly to your house. Go to legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com to download their free gold investing guide. I've read it and there is so much valuable information there. Friends, now is not the time to roll the dice with your hard-earned money. Find out about the growth potential that gold offers you. Contact Legacy Precious Metals today and tell them that I sent you.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jenna's off tonight. I'm Ken Rosato. President Trump recently said that he's decided who his running mate will be, but he's not sharing the details just yet. How important is a presidential running mate to you? Over the years, people have argued a presidential candidate's choice for number two shows the type of people they will surround themselves with once in office. Well, Trump's already been in office, so people already have an idea of those whom he will surround himself with. This time, though, it's a little different. The person who Trump chooses will likely be the prime candidate for president 4 years from now. Here is the short list. U.S. Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio, a solid conservative and current Trump supporter. Problem is, he was an early and vocal Trump critic who gradually warmed up to the president. Former biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. He's a self-made multimillionaire, extremely articulate, minority, wife is a doctor, ardent Trump supporter. Problem is, he is still a little young and a little inexperienced, and his confidence sometimes rubs certain people the wrong way. U.S. Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, a true American story. He came from poverty. He was raised by a single mom. He built a successful small business. Super eloquent Trump supporter, warm and very gregarious. President Trump, in fact, says that he is better at supporting Trump than he was at supporting himself when he ran for president. Next would be Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Now, he could help Trump reach Hispanic voters as he is of Cuban heritage and he speaks Spanish. He's also a former presidential candidate himself. The problem is, Florida is not a state that Trump needs help to carry, and Rubio would have to leave the Senate and move out of Florida as a citizen. He can no longer be a citizen of Florida, as both the Second and 12th Amendments actually say that a president and vice president cannot come from the same state. A lot of people don't realize that. Next is North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. He's an experienced and popular governor, so he has executive branch experience. He's a self-made successful businessman. The problem is he's known as a crier. He's been known to get emotional when addressing groups of people and speaking about sad subjects, and Trump has said that he is not a crier because he prefers to get things done. And lastly on this list, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Just a few weeks ago, it would have been thought that New York was out of reach for Trump, so he wouldn't have gotten her in as vice president, as a vice presidential candidate, because he wouldn't have needed votes from New York in that case. But now polls are showing that it is not unrealistic to think that Trump has a shot at the Big Apple. With us to talk more about the possible running mates for President Trump is Saurabh Sharma, who joins us now. In fact, what is the name of your group, Saurabh? I'm sorry.
American Moment.
Thank you. And I was reading a little about American Moment. It's amazing for younger people and their political views and how it sharpens minds and finds these individuals. So thank you so much for being behind that. Saurabh, who do you think on that list has the best shot, or are there some others you think we haven't listed?
I think that short list is about right. Those are the names that I think are in serious contention. As far as who is most likely to get it, I think it's narrowed down to a couple of candidates. And candidly, I think the person who would above and beyond be the best choice for the president to make is Senator J.D. Vance for a whole variety of reasons. But and most of those have, I think, only increased since that disastrous debate performance for Joe Biden last week. I think that the president sees this election coming into real clarity, and now he's thinking about legacy. And J.D. Vance not only would help him deliver a resounding victory in November, but also help him make sure that his administration is effective, capable, and that the next Republican president after him would carry on his legacy and how he's transformed the party.
Interesting. All right, so we are talking about that narrow list, but Trump could surprise us. Do you think he might do that?
You know, I think this time the campaign has been extraordinarily careful and cautious when it comes to its approach to many things. I think this is one reason to be relatively optimistic about the president's chances of winning the election this fall. Compare it to the president's campaign in 2016 and 2020, which all have their own idiosyncrasies.
Hold on, we're going to bring you back. We're going to bring you back in just a second for the next segment. Here's a question. What about illegal migrants? Do they commit crimes at a lower rate than Americans? When we come back. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jenna's off. I'm Ken Rosato. If you listen to liberals, people who enter the United States illegally are all peace-loving people who don't commit crimes.
That crime rates among immigrants, both legal and undocumented, are lower than those among native-born Americans.
What Congresswoman Ross fails to tell us is that statistic is from the Cato Institute, and it is only based on murders and only from the state of Texas. It does not look at any other municipalities. It does not look at any other types of crimes. For example, it fails to take into account the fact that just entering the United States at an entry point other than a legal entry point is an illegal act, meaning you have committed a crime. In United States Code Title 8, subsection 1325, it says it is a crime to unlawfully enter the United States and applies to people who do not enter with proper inspection at a point of entry, such as those who enter between ports of entry, avoid examination or inspection, or who make false statements while entering or attempting to enter. And subsection 1326 makes it a crime to unlawfully re-enter, attempt to unlawfully re-enter, or to be found in the United States after having been deported. If you ask members of the ACLU, they'll say, oh, no, it's not a crime to be here illegally. What they fail to mention is, no, it may not be a crime once you're here to be standing there illegally, if you will, but the act of entering the U.S. illegally is a crime, which makes the person who does so a criminal. Illegal entry, 8 U.S.C. 132, makes it a crime to unlawfully enter the United States. It is very, very clear, and those who do not enter from a legal port of entry are committing a crime. Joining us tonight once again is our dear friend Saurabh Sharma, who was good enough to be with us in the last segment. So Saurabh, excuse me, when we look at that, we look at the law and then we think of the comments from the ACLU that people who are illegal migrants, as we call them, are not committing a crime. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think this is one of those classic lies that people are able to tell with statistics. The Cato Institute is an open borders organization. They've never claimed to be anything else. And you're right that that data is highly limited. It only captures the migrant crime data when it comes to murder in one state at one time. We also know that there's plenty of big city police departments with pressure from far left prosecutors that have actually started playing games with these statistics. They don't label migrant crime as such, or they don't even ask the question to begin with, or they are artificially trying to suppress these numbers. So don't believe the lying media on this. Believe your own eyes. American citizens recognize that we have a crime problem in our streets, and a lot of it seems to be downstream of the migrant crime wave that has come across the border. And that's why we need to have President Trump in office to be able to shut down the situation of the border, deport 20 million illegal aliens, and actually restore order here in the United States.
Now, you talk about the playing with these statistics. How about when you have a district attorney, as in Alvin Bragg, in just Manhattan, New York? For those not from New York has 5 counties that make up the city. Manhattan is just one of those counties, and Alvin Bragg, there he is on your screen, is the district attorney duly elected by the people. He was considered the most conservative of the wave of Democrats when he was chosen as district attorney. The day that he entered office, he put out a manifesto saying, "We will no longer prosecute these crimes." And it was a list about the thickness of the length of my arm. So there were a whole bunch of crimes that police would no longer arrest people for because his assistant DAs were instructed and ordered not to prosecute people on. So therefore, all the potential illegal migrants who might have committed these lesser crimes will never know because they're not being prosecuted. And anybody who does get arrested is let out of jail. They don't have to pay any kind of a fine. They don't have to pay any kind of bail. That's under the New York State no bail law. And that's happening in many states around the country. So this is part of the gimmick. They say, that illegal migrants are committing crimes at a lower rate per capita than U.S. citizens. But if you don't, it's like in the case of New York, if you don't even ask if they're here illegally, which they don't, they're forbidden to ask. And if they do ask, they're forbidden to report it to the federal authorities. So therefore, there is no record of illegals committing those crimes. So this is really just a game.
Absolutely. And think about Alvin Bragg specifically. One of the most ideologically motivated prosecutors in America has been on this witch hunt against President Trump. His resources, prosecutorial resources and otherwise, are being spent on imprisoning his political opponents, not keeping what is really one of the greatest cities on earth safe and secure. I think it's also important to remember, you have these think tanks putting out these statistics saying that, migrants commit less crimes than native-born Americans. The correct amount of legal immigrant crime is zero, just like the correct amount of illegal immigrants in the United States is zero. So we shouldn't have a lower standard by comparing it to the crime already in the United States. If you're coming across our border illegally, one, you shouldn't be here, but two, you should be on your absolute best behavior. And that applies to anyone we bring to the United States because migration should benefit the citizens of the United States, not foreigners.
Saurabh, I'm so glad you pointed that out because with the Cato Institute, they played this little game. When they broke down the statistics about the per capita numbers of people who commit crimes, they didn't break it down into two categories. They broke it down into three. The three categories were U.S. citizens, then legal migrants, and illegal migrants. Why did they do that? Well, when you take legal migrants off the list of U.S. citizens, okay, and you count them separately, then what happens is it increases the rate of murders per capita among U.S. citizens. So it's a little higher. When you add legal migrants who, by virtue of their legality, the fact that they went through the legal process to come here, it says that they're law-abiding people. Legal migrants tend not to break laws. Why? Because they register with the government. People know who they are, where they are, how they can be found. And the fact that they would respect our country enough to come here legally tells you they probably are not going to commit a crime. That's not what they're likely to do. When you take their number and add them to U.S.-born citizens, the rate of murders per capita decreases significantly for that group, whereas the number of illegal migrants committing murders per capita is then in the highest category. So Cato was very clever in removing legal migrants from that statistic. So it would look like U.S.-born citizens are terrible people, and these poor people coming in through illegal crossings, they're not committing crimes at all. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, they shouldn't be committing any crimes. And if they want to come here legally, there is a way to do it. I am so tired of hearing Democrats say, we need to change the immigration laws. We have 175 immigration laws on the books. It is relatively easy, if you will, to come into this country. Probably easier to come into this country than any other country on the planet. So when you hear this, it's kind of a red herring. When you hear the argument that we need better immigration laws, it's sort of a joke.
Absolutely. And it's ultimately concern trolling on their part. Whenever Republicans talk about solving the crisis at the border, these liberal Republicans combined with the entirety of the Democratic Party say, and therefore we need comprehensive immigration reform, which when those words are said in Washington, hold on to your wallet. What they're trying to do is amnesty and throw open our migration system. Don't listen to them. Shut down the border immediately.
I can remember under the first, it was under Reagan's second term. there was an agreement that was reached with Congress. You're maybe too young to remember this, but you probably know because you're a bit of an historian, that there were 2.5 million Mexican Americans. They were here illegally. They did not have papers. For the most part, they came in over the years to help pick crops in California. That was needed by the industry. So the industry, because they were close to Reagan came from California, they went to him and said, look, we can't afford to do it any other way. We need them. So Reagan said, one time and one time only, I will sign into law a law that legalizes these 2.5 million, but it will only be one time in history. Congress went along with it because they said it would only be a one-time amnesty in history, never again. Of course, now they wait 30 to 40 years so people will forget about that, and now they'll be looking for amnesty once again.
That's exactly the playbook that the liberals in Congress play. They pretend like they actually care about border security, and then they pull the rug out from under congressional Republicans who aren't smart enough to realize that they're being tricked. This is why when President Trump takes office in January, he should say that Congress needs to pass something like H.R. 2 with no exceptions. We're not increasing the amount of legal migration. We're not doing DACA.
Saurabh, we're out of time, but that's exactly, I'm with you 100%, my friend. When we come back, invoking the 25th Amendment, is it just uncomfortable dinner conversation for Democrats or more? Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jenna's off tonight. I'm Ken Rosano. Since President Biden's disastrous debate appearance last week and Biden apparently refusing to step aside, there have been calls to invoke the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president is unable to discharge the duties of office. So both the vice president, Harris, and most of the Biden-appointed cabinet would then have to state that Biden is mentally unfit to discharge the duties of his office. Joining me right now is Jim Nelles, economist, Navy vet, and journalist. Jim, it is nice to have you with us today. And can you see it coming to this, invoking the 25th Amendment?
Well, do you remember during the Trump presidency, they called for this every week, and they wanted Mike Pence to become the president. I think right now they're saying they want the 25th Amendment, but if anyone ever took a step back and realized that it would be Kamala Harris as president, maybe crazy sleepy old Joe's not the worst option that we have right now. So I don't think we're going to do it. I actually think he's going to get enough pressure from donors and other politicians that he's going to step aside. The real question for the Democrat Party is, are they going to overstep and work around a black woman to be the presidential nominee and go to someone like a Gavin Newsom, or are they going to pull in someone else? Because that is going to be a real political nightmare for the Democrat Party right now.
Yeah, their biggest voting bloc is African-American females. So it's not like they could look at a different bloc and go after them. They've lost white males. They have lost certainly some of their support of white females, and they have lost a small portion of black males. So really their biggest and strongest bloc right now, maybe all they have, is African-American women. And if they don't have Kamala Harris on this in this circumstance, it's very possible that they could lose even 5 or 10%, which could cost it all for them.
Absolutely agree. I mean, their only other choice is Michelle Obama, and I really don't think she wants it, to be honest with you. I think she's enjoying being a kingmaker. I think that she and Obama enjoy running the country from behind the scenes. The other thing, quite frankly, is I think the people that pull the strings of the Democrat Party don't believe that they could control Michelle Obama, and therefore they would not want her in. So if Joe does drop out, which actually I do not think he will, it will be Kamala, and Kamala will just be another puppet of the Soros regime, and we'll see what happens there. But for now, let's assume it's going to be sleepy old Joe, and we're going to see a Trump landslide here in 2024.
But humor me for just a second. Let's play the what if game, okay? So say, for instance, they do decide, enough people behind the scenes say, hey, the donors are going to go, no one's going to vote for this guy, and they decide that they will invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, it clarifies that if the vice president and the majority of the cabinet send a letter to Congress saying the president must be deposed, Vice President Harris becomes the acting president. However, what could then happen is President, or in that case, it would be former President Biden, can then write his own letter to Congress and say, no, I am fully competent. I should still be president. In which case, Vice President Harris, because she goes back to being vice president, she and the majority of the cabinet would write a follow-up letter. That follow-up letter goes back to Congress saying, no, he really is not with it. He needs to go. And in that case, you need a 2/3 majority of both houses of Congress to vote to depose President Biden, and then they would install Vice President Harris. If you could follow all that without getting a headache, you're a much better person than me.
So one, I would like to know what color crayon President Biden would use to write his letter to Congress saying that he's totally mentally competent to remain as president. But let's be honest, you're never going to get 2/3 of both houses to vote to get him out of office at this point in time. It's just simply not going to happen. You see guys like James Clyburn out there already saying that Biden was overprepared. But then you see his White House deputy saying, well, you know, he took a nap every day. We started at 11, then he took a nap, and then we finished at 4. And then he took a few days off to rest. So, you know, at the end of the day, again, it's an interesting discussion, but we're never going to get there with the 25th Amendment. It's really, really too hard. The obstacles are way too high to make this happen. And again, all Joe has to do is take a crayon and write, no, I'm not. And then that makes it go back to the House and to the Senate, and you're not going to get 2/3 of each.
Hey, listen, all he needs is a good dish of ice cream and he'll be just fine. But you have to think about it this way, too. We have about a minute left here. Let's just say, if the process got started, the question is, who on the cabinet would be the person to start it all off? Because if it backfires, that person's toast. Their political career is over. And then you'd probably have to have coordination with the vice president. It would be interesting. Do you think you know somebody on the cabinet who might not like him?
Oh, I think it's Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete wants nothing more than to take over for President Biden. I mean, we know he's doing a bad job as Secretary of Transportation because we know who the Secretary of Transportation is, right? So Mayor Pete wants nothing more than to get political power. And once this administration is done, he's over. He's going back to Indiana. Maybe he'll get a job on MSNBC. But at the end of the day, he's the one that wants to take this over. He meets all of the special requirements.
Jim, we're out of time, man. Thank you very much, Jim Nelles. I appreciate it. I'm with you. Jim Nelles, economist, Navy vet, and journalist. And thank you for watching us tonight. Please don't forget to come back and join Jenna Ellis, who will be back in the seat. I appreciate you for having me in tonight. Have a good one.